Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how sometimes you just want to really get a grip on a huge topic without reading 1,000 pages?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's what we're doing today. We're taking this deep dive into the Roman Empire.
Still so relevant.
I know, right? And we're using Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire as our guide.
A classic for a reason.
For sure. But instead of just listing emperors and dates, we're going deeper. How did these emperors actually hold on to power for so long? And what did that mean for the everyday Romans living under their rule?
It's really fascinating when you start to see the connections between Gibbon's work and the political dynamics we see even today.
Totally. So let's jump right in. Gibbon calls Augustus's reign a monarchy in disguise.
Right, because he was really careful not to make the same mistakes as Julius Caesar.
Oh yeah, Caesar's assassination. Talk about a cautionary tale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The senators were terrified of him becoming too powerful, too much like a king.
So Augustus had to walk on eggshells to avoid getting stabbed in the back too.
Basically, he was really strategic, very slowly consolidating power, and making sure not to alarm the Senate too much.
It's all about appearances, right? Those politicians today who are super careful about their image.
Precisely. Augustus was a master of that. He understood that perception is everything, so he let the Senate keep their titles and positions.
But I bet those titles didn't really mean much in practice, did they?
You're right, he was subtly transferring their power to himself all the while, making it look like he was just another guy looking out for Rome.
Wow, sneaky. But also brilliant.
He even chose his titles carefully. He never actually called himself king. Instead, he used titles like princeps, meaning first citizen.
First citizen sounds way less threatening than all-powerful emperor. Did people really buy that?
They did. That title actually gave him a legal basis for his authority. He was no longer just another senator. He was above them, able to propose laws, command the army.
While still appearing to operate within the existing system. That's amazing. Talk about understanding how to frame a message. He essentially made absolute power seem palatable.
And that was key to maintaining peace and preventing uprisings. By preserving the illusion of freedom, he secured his own position and ushered in a new era for Rome.
But even with all this political maneuvering, you have to wonder, was there any other force powerful enough to challenge the emperor? I mean, Rome was famous for its legions, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Roman army, especially those legions, were a force to be reckoned with. Emperors who forgot that often didn't last very long.
It sounds like walking a tightrope. Keep the army happy, but not so powerful they think they can just replace you whenever they feel like it. How did any of them manage that?
Some were definitely better at it than others. Gibbon talks about how chaotic things got after an emperor died, especially when it wasn't clear who was next in line.
Oh, I bet. Succession crises are like the ultimate power vacuum.
Right. And imagine those legions, battle-hardened and ambitious, suddenly wondering, whoa, who should we be taking orders from now? It's a recipe for disaster.
And I'm guessing those legions wouldn't hesitate to back a powerful general who made them big promises. It's like Roman politics was a blood sport.
You could say that. One really interesting example Gibbon talks about is Vespasian. He became emperor after a brutal civil war.
He wasn't from a fancy noble family, was he?
Nope. He was the original self-made emperor, worked his way up through the ranks.
And because of that, he knew the army was the key to staying in power.
Exactly. And to make sure his dynasty lasted, he made his son, Titus, his co-ruler.
Smart move. Titus was already super popular with the legions, wasn't he?
He was, especially after his victories in Judea.
So Vespasian secures the throne. Titus guarantees the army stays loyal. That's some savvy political maneuvering.
Absolutely. That kind of strategic thinking, keeping the army happy but firmly under control, was crucial for any emperor who wanted to survive.
Makes you realize what a tough job it was. But speaking of emperors who thrived, Gibbon talks about the reigns of Trajan and the Antonines as this kind of golden age for Rome. But let's be real. What did that actually mean for the average person living back then? Was it all sunshine and togas?
Well, it wasn't quite like that. Life in ancient Rome, even during a so-called golden age, wasn't always a party.
Right, because even with great emperors, just the fact that so much power rested with a single person, it's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things Gibbon highlights so well. He talks about how the emperor's character, their personality, was basically everything.
It's like their mood could make or break the whole empire.
Pretty much. A good emperor, like Trajan or Marcus Aurelius, meant reasonable taxes, a stable government. They focused on things like infrastructure projects that actually benefited people.
Yeah, like those amazing Roman aqueducts.
Exactly. But if you had a bad emperor, look out. Corruption, cruelty, just plain old incompetence. All of that could spell disaster for the average Roman.
So even during these good times under Trajan and the Antonines, there was always this underlying sense of, okay, what happens when the next emperor comes along?
That's the thing. Even if things were good, you were just one bad emperor away from everything falling apart. And Gibbon actually compares the Roman Empire under a bad emperor to a safe and dreary prison.
Wow. Safe, maybe, but not exactly a ringing endorsement of Roman life. And the worst part is, unlike today, there wasn't really anything anyone could do about it.
Exactly. Think about it. No elections, no constitution, no real way to remove a bad emperor from power once they were in. Your fate, your family's fate, it all came down to one person's decisions, one person's whims.
That's a lot of pressure, both for the emperor and everyone living under their rule. It's amazing to think about how different our world is today because of ideas like democracy and limits on power. Though it does make you wonder, would we be willing to give up some of those freedoms in exchange for the stability and prosperity that Rome offered? It's a question that's still relevant today, centuries after the fall of Rome.
It is. And it's something Gibbon really makes you think about. The decline and fall of the Roman Empire. It's not just a history book. It's about human nature, ambition, the dangers of unchecked power.
For sure. This deep dive has barely scratched the surface of Gibbon's work and of Roman history itself. There's just so much more to explore.
Absolutely. From their greatest triumphs to their ultimate collapse, the Roman Empire is full of incredible stories and important lessons for us today.
Well, Gibbon definitely praises this period for its peace and prosperity, and under Trajan, the empire expanded like crazy. Then you have the Antonines, who brought a period of stability. But, I mean...
It's easy to romanticize these periods, isn't it?
Right. So, like, how much were regular Romans actually benefiting from all of this?
Yeah, that's the big question. Life for the average Roman, even in these so-called golden ages, it wasn't always pretty.
Even with emperors considered good, like Trajan and Marcus Aurelius.
Even then. One of Gibbon's most insightful points, I think, is how much depended on the individual character of the emperor.
Because they had so much power, right?
Exactly. A good emperor meant reasonable taxes, relative peace, maybe some impressive public works projects, stuff that made a real difference in people's lives.
They did love their aqueducts and bathhouses.
Right. But a bad emperor? That was a completely different story.
Everything could just fall apart, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Corruption, cruelty, even just plain old incompetence could spell disaster for everyone.
So even during a good reign, you'd always have that worry in the back of your mind, like, what happens next? What happens when this emperor's gone?
It's like living on a nice edge, in a way. You were always just one bad emperor away from everything falling apart.
And Gibbon actually compares the Roman Empire under a tyrannical emperor to being stuck in a safe and dreary prison.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Definitely not the kind of golden age you want to be a part of. And the thing that really struck me, unlike today, if you were a Roman citizen back then and you got a bad emperor, there was nothing you could do about it.
Right. No way to vote them out, no constitution to limit their power, no real way to hold them accountable.
Your whole life, your family's fate, it all came down to the decisions of one person.
Yeah, it's the thing about absolute power. It's a double-edged sword.
It really makes you appreciate the systems we have in place today, flawed as they may be, to at least try to prevent that kind of absolute rule. Though it does make you wonder, would we be willing to give up some of those freedoms in exchange for, I don't know, maybe the stability and prosperity that Rome offered at its height? It's a question that's still so relevant.
It really is. And that's what makes Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire such an incredible work. It's not just a history book. It's about human nature. It's about power. And it's about the choices we make as individuals and societies.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today's deep dive, but man, we've just scratched the surface of Gibbon's masterpiece and Roman history itself.
There's always more to discover, right?
Always. From their incredible triumphs to their eventual collapse, the Roman Empire is endlessly fascinating, and there are so many lessons we can still learn from their story.
Absolutely.
Thanks for exploring this with me. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep exploring the endlessly fascinating world of history.